The 1980 Disney-produced haunted house movie, The Watcher in the Woods, is known primarily as something by which a lot of kids were scared during childhood. It's one of a handful of completely inexplicable calculations made by the House of Mouse during the late 70s and early 80s to attract a slightly more mature crowd, or at the very least, interest its younger audience in a new set of thrills to prepare them for their lives as filmgoers. It's no surprise that the film turned out as uncanny and terrifying as it did. It was a veritable class reunion for the venerable horror production house Hammer Studios. Director John Huff, legendary screenwriter Brian Clemens, director of photography Alan Hume, and actress Bette Davis all did time for Hammer. The Watcher in the Woods is pure Hammer horror. The setting, an Old English manor previously used in Robert Wise's The Haunting, is right out of the Hammer style guide, as is the deliberately bloodless earth-tone photography and art direction. The special effects are the only thing that really situate the film in Walt Disney's 80s. Former skater Lynn Holly Johnson and Kyle Richards play the daughters of Carol Baker and David McCallum, who buy their spooky new digs from a recluse played by Bette Davis. She only lets them in when she sees that Johnson looks exactly like her years-dead daughter, killed in a ruinous seance hosted by her friends, each so haunted in their way by the incident that none of them have been able to move on with their lives. That in and of itself is a neat metaphor for Disney, who'd been unable or unwilling to change their approach to movies until the late 70s. And even in their attempted exorcism of the previous house style in these new and frequently terrifying movies, they still couldn't keep their hands together in the circle long enough, so to speak. They re-edited the movie when it scared too many people, and released it with a less strange ending. Neither quite works, but given the choice between a confrontation with a thoroughly creepy and creatively designed monster, followed by a brief detour in some kind of Xanadu-esque dimension, and a fairly ordinary special effects display, I know which I'd prefer. Huff's craft, as so far as I know, went basically unremarked upon for most of his career, despite having directed a handful of terrific cult movies with fairly good reputations. He never became anybody's favorite auteur. The Watcher in the Woods is a distillation of his strengths, specifically his elegant way with the camera. He and Hume showcase the dimensions of their haunted environs with a rich, curious eye. Not only do they make their locations imposing, beautiful, and forbidding, but their method serves as a stylistic counterpoint to the POV camera they use to announce the presence of the malevolent force in the woods. The point-of-view camera was in the middle of becoming the dominant horror movie technique, at least in America, having been introduced but not quite trademarked as physical proof of a serial killer on the prowl. The Watcher in the Woods uses the camera to announce not a physical presence, but a ghostly one, and in so doing anticipates the technique being put to iconic use the following year in Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead. Maybe it was the Disney label that kept The Watcher in the Woods far enough away from the horror movie canon, and likely as not, the very effective scares kept it out of rotation as a children's movie, which leaves it in a curious no-man's land, neither fish nor fowl. But it's unmistakably an incredibly confident, old-fashioned, scary story. When movies like this manage to get made today, they usually sink like stones at the box office, so perhaps The Watcher in the Woods was an accidental warning to the curious about misplaced ambition. I'm grateful for Disney's bizarre confidence in this period of their history, because a film like The Watcher in the Woods could only be the product of clashing sensibilities and rogue artists working under company dictates. More studios ought to try confidence in their artists. It's always a good look.